Well, it's finally here, and I'm finally done reading it. James Islington's The Strength of the Few is the follow-up, the highly anticipated follow-up to James Islington's The Will of the Many. And now, listen, I was really excited for this book. If you're a follower of my channel at all, you know that The Will of the Many was kind of a big deal for me. It was a book that made me really excited to start reading again. Now, I had been reading a couple of books before it came out, but it was the one that was like setting me up to, I think, become an actual reader, as someone who wants to spend their time and get excited about reading. And so whenever The Strength of the Few was coming out, or announced to be coming out, whenever I found out it was going to be a thing, I couldn't wait for it, especially after finishing The Will of the Many. I think The Will of the Many wraps up so strong. It reveals not necessarily a genre change, though that might be kind of a thing, but it's a pretty massive revelation in terms of the structure of what the rest of this franchise or the rest of the series is going to be. And so going right into The Strength of the Few, I already knew that this was going to be a pretty ambitious book. Without spoiling anything for the first book and the twist at the end of The Will of the Many, we knew that structurally this was going to have its own challenges of how do you accomplish the structural change that's going to happen from the end of the first book. And I think for the most part that The Strength of the Few succeeds at that change. It succeeds at becoming a cohesive story, one that is really building off of what the first book does, even though you're kind of venturing out into different territory, different stories. I think there are a lot of people who have read The Strength of the Few who clearly adore it, who clearly love it. I was not someone who was in love with the book during the process of reading this book. It was one of those things where I think right now, having stepped away from this book, I finished this book a couple of weeks ago. Pretty much as soon as it came out, I finished it within a week. And so while I was reading it, I struggled with it. I wrestled with it a lot, mainly because of the pacing and the plotting, not so much because of there aren't interesting things happen. If you really kind of go back and you think about what is happening in this book, there are a lot of really cool things developing. There are very few moments in the book that don't matter to that particular sub-story or that particular story. And so it works really well at doing all of those things. My biggest issue is all of those things are interesting, but because of the structure of this book, you can't really enjoy it in the moment because you're hopping around back and forth. And now that's nothing new to books. That's nothing new to storytelling of hopping between different perspectives. And so you leave this story behind a little bit to go explore another. But compared to The Will of the Many, like The Strength of the Few, it does not cascade in a way that The Will of the Many does. The Will of the Many just doesn't stop. It's a really impressive, like, just bombardment of plot and growth and development. And The Strength of the Few has all of that, but you're having to hit pause a lot in this book and then going to go see something else and then come back to the other thing. And so for me, I think The Strength of the Few, looking back on it, really considering what happens in the story and what it means for the series moving forward, I'm like, man, that's really cool. That's a really awesome development. The way that this could end is going to be really interesting. And if James can land this plane, it's going to be an awesome book, or awesome series, I should say. And so it's hard for me to rate this because I don't think I had as much or as good of a time reading this book. But I think I might like it thematically, and I might like the potential of this book more than The Will of the Many. And so it's hard for me to read this as, or rate this as, just its own singular book and story, because so much of it is a setup book. And so I think if you liked The Will of the Many, if you've read The Will of the Many and you're like, well, I'm excited to see what goes on, I think you should probably temper your expectations in terms of what to expect in terms of the pacing. The Will of the Many is a much easier read than The Strength of the Few. This gets so deep. I love all of these individual stories that happen in this and the worlds that are developed and built in this. I like the exploration of different cultures and sort of different inspiration of different cultures into those individual stories. And so the interesting thing is The Will of the Many kind of ends in a place where stories begin to diverge. And at the beginning of this book and the entirety of this book is the divergence of those stories, but we're starting to see the potential of what happens whenever those stories come together. And I think, once again, the potential of the franchise, the potential of the series is really exciting because while I may not have enjoyed the book or enjoyed the process of reading this book at the time of reading it, that last act of this book is awesome. The final act of The Strength of the Few, I think, shows that James really knows how to create incredible hype moments, as well as there's a really tender moment towards the end of this book that just kind of caught me off guard that I thought was really brilliant and maybe showed a side of James that we didn't see in The Will of the Many. So that last bit, I mean, I am committed to this series. I'm really excited to see where it goes next. And to anyone who is like reading it, or if you've read this and you're like, you know what, I didn't enjoy it as much, or I can't get into it, I understand. It makes sense that it's hard to kind of stay in or get into because you are essentially, it feels like you're reading a new series when you start this book. It doesn't necessarily abandon what you know of The Will of the Many. That's there. But once again, the ambition, the scale, the scope of this is so much grander than what the first book is. And so kudos to James for the most part, I think, succeeding in that. Once again, I think as an experience, it's tough to sort of grasp it. But I do wonder if when this series wraps up and ends, we may look back at The Strength of the Few and we may look back at The Will of the Many. And I think when it ends, this will be the book that we think about or talk about the most. This is going to be the one that says, no, this is actually the one that kind of set us up into where we're going to end or what the potential of this story and these characters are. I think The Strength of the Few is probably a great example of why the short form video reviews or even your Goodreads reviews of a book can't really grasp the nuance of an enjoyment of a book. I, once again, had a hard time reading it. Was like, when am I going to like this? Or when is it going to click with me? When am I going to love this book? Because I'm seeing so many people love this book or claiming that they love this book and saying, hey, it blew their minds. And it took so long for it to do that for me. And so at the same time, there are people who are like, man, this is a real big disappointment and I didn't like it. And I get that. I understand the experience not hitting you in the way that The Will of the Many does. But when I look back at what actually happens in the book, I think it's actually really impressive. I think James does a fantastic job of setting up what's to come. And I assume, my hope is that I think the next book will probably be the best book in the series. I think there's supposed to be 4 books as far as I know. But we're getting somewhere. And I think James has the ability to land this plane in a really interesting way and in a deep and impactful way that maybe we weren't quite expecting, and in a different way too. So if you've heard the hype or experienced the hype of The Will of the Many and haven't read it, but then you're like, well, The Strength of the Few probably isn't as good, or maybe it's not worth checking out. I think it's still worth a read. I think it's still enjoyable enough to get through. I think some of the stories are more entertaining than other. I think some of the kind of perspectives are more entertaining than others. But, once again, I don't give in to FOMO. It's okay to see this book and be like, well, I don't know if I'm going to end up liking this series, and I know this book is sort of a polarizing book. Go ahead, wait for the next book. And if people say, no, we wouldn't have gotten there without this, and where we got was really good, wait. There's so many books out there that you can read. You don't have to just hop on to the book that everyone else is excited about. It's okay. I say that as I have a pile of books over here that I'm desperate to read. But yeah, so that's my thoughts of The Strength of the Few. Have you read it? Let me know what you think. For now, I'll talk to you later.